Elena Vasquez turned 73 on a Tuesday in April, the kind of spring day where sunlight filters through kitchen windows and warms old wooden tables. She celebrated quietly, the way she preferred things these days, with a small cake her daughter had dropped off that morning. The frosting said, "Happy birthday, Mom," in wobbly blue letters, her granddaughter's handiwork, no doubt. After lunch, Elena made her way to the garden behind her modest home. 20 years of careful planting had transformed the once empty patch of land into a small haven of roses, marigolds, and herbs. This was where she spent most afternoons, pruning and watering while humming to herself. Sometimes, when she was sure the neighbors weren't around, the humming would grow into full singing, her voice rising above the fence and drifting off with the breeze. "Nana, are you out here singing again?" Sophia's voice called from the back door. Elena's granddaughter appeared, clutching a small gift bag and grinning widely. At 19, Sophia was all energy and ideas, with the same dark eyes Elena had passed down through generations. "Just talking to my plants," Elena replied, brushing soil from her gardening gloves. "They grow better when you talk to them." "Yeah, and I bet they grow even better when you sing to them," Sophia teased, making her way down the stone path. "I came to give you your real birthday present." Elena sighed. "The cake was enough, sweetheart. You shouldn't spend your money on me." Sophia ignored this, as she always did when her grandmother tried to discourage gifts. She thrust the small bag forward. "Open it!" Inside was an envelope. Elena pulled it out slowly, wondering what her granddaughter had schemed this time. Last year, it had been cooking classes that Elena had actually ended up enjoying, despite her initial reluctance. Tickets? Elena held up 2 glossy passes, squinting at the print without her reading glasses. "Not just any tickets," Sophia said, bouncing slightly on her toes. "These are VIP audience passes to Voices of the Nation, live auditions. The show is filming in the city next week." Elena stared at the tickets, then at her granddaughter's expectant face. "The singing competition? The one on TV?" "The very same. And look who's judging this season." Sophia pointed to a name printed at the bottom of the ticket. Elena's heart did a small skip. "Anthony Rivera? Yes, your favorite singer of all time. We're going to see him in person." Elena handed the tickets back. "Oh, Sophia, that's very thoughtful, but I can't go to something like that. All those people, all that noise, it's for young folks like you." Sophia refused to take the tickets. "Nana, you've been watching this show for 5 seasons. You never miss an episode. You deserve to see it live." Her expression softened. "Plus, I know how much his music means to you." It was true. Anthony Rivera's songs had been the soundtrack to many important moments in Elena's life. His first album had come out the year her husband passed away, and somehow, those songs had carried her through the darkest months. She'd followed his career for nearly 15 years now, admiring not just his voice but the stories he told through music. "I don't know, sweetheart." Elena wavered, though Sophia could tell she was weakening. "Please? It's my birthday gift to you. Plus, I already asked Mom, and she said she'd drive us there and back." Elena looked down at the tickets again. The show filmed just an hour away. It would be a single afternoon. And to hear Anthony Rivera in person. "All right," she finally agreed. "But I'm not dressing up fancy." Sophia hugged her tightly. "You'll have the best time, I promise." Later that evening, after Sophia had gone home, Elena found herself standing in front of the full-length mirror in her bedroom. She didn't look at her reflection very often these days. What was the point? But tonight, she studied the woman looking back at her, silver hair cut in a practical bob, lines etched around her eyes and mouth, hands slightly gnarled from arthritis. Time had certainly left its mark. She took a deep breath and began to sing, softly at first, then with growing confidence. The melody was one of Anthony Rivera's ballads, a song about lost chances and new beginnings. Her voice filled the small bedroom, clear and strong, with a richness that belied her age. Few people knew that Elena Vasquez could really sing. Not just carry a tune like most folks, but really sing, with technique and power and emotion that could raise goosebumps on listeners' arms. In another life, it might have been her calling. She'd been just 17 when the music teacher at her high school recognized her talent. "You have a gift," Mr. Torres had told her. "A rare one." He'd connected her with his own former teacher, an aging Italian opera singer named Mrs. Bellini, who had agreed to give Elena lessons for a reduced fee. For 3 wonderful years, Elena had trained with Mrs. Bellini twice a week. The old woman was strict but kind, pushing Elena to perfect her breathing, her pitch, her emotional delivery. "You sing from here," Mrs. Bellini would say, pointing to her heart. "Not just from your throat." Elena had dreamed of studying music. In college, maybe even trying for a career in performance, but life had other plans. Her father's sudden illness meant the family needed money more than they needed a daughter with artistic ambitions. Elena took a job as a secretary, then met her husband, then had children of her own. The singing lessons stopped. The dreams were tucked away. Still, she never stopped singing, in church choirs, in the shower, to her babies as she rocked them to sleep, and now to her garden plants. The talent Mrs. Bellini had nurtured remained, preserved like a pressed flower between the pages of Elena's life. As the last notes of the song faded, Elena closed her eyes. What might have happened if she'd pursued that other path? Would she have stood on stages, heard applause, recorded albums? Or would she have struggled and failed, missing out on the family that had become her world? It didn't matter now. That door had closed long ago, and Elena had made peace with the choices of her youth. She had loved being a teacher for 30 years, had raised 2 wonderful children, and now had grandchildren who brought her joy. Her life was good, if quiet. She put away the concert tickets in her bedside drawer. Anthony Rivera was what could have been a different version of a musical life. Elena had made peace with her choices, but that didn't mean she couldn't appreciate his talent or enjoy his music. The week passed quickly. Elena found herself growing excited, despite her initial reluctance. She even went shopping with her daughter Lisa for a new blouse to wear to the show, a deep purple one that Lisa insisted brought out the warmth in her eyes. The day of the show arrived sunny and clear. Lisa picked them up at noon, and Sophia chattered excitedly during the entire drive to the city. The venue was larger than Elena had expected, a renovated theater with ornate moldings and plush red seats. Their VIP tickets gave them seats near the front, close enough to see the judges' table clearly. "Can you believe we're actually here?" Sophia whispered as they settled into their seats. "Look, there's where Anthony will sit." She pointed to the judges' table where 4 empty chairs waited. Elena felt a flutter of nerves. It seemed silly to be excited about seeing a celebrity at her age, but here she was, heart beating faster at the thought of being in the same room as Anthony Rivera. The audience filled in around them, mostly younger people, but some Elena's age, too. The energy in the room was infectious, everyone talking, laughing, speculating about which contestants might perform today. A young woman with a clipboard approached their row. "Excuse me," she said, smiling at Elena and Sophia. "We'd like to know a bit about our audience members for possible audience participation segments. Would you mind telling me your names and a bit about yourselves?" "I'm Sofia Garcia, her granddaughter," said eagerly. "And this is my grandmother, Elena Vasquez. We're here because my grandmother is a huge fan of Anthony Rivera. It's her birthday gift." The woman smiled. "That's lovely. And what do you do, Ms. Vasquez?" "I'm retired now," Elena replied. "I was a school teacher for 30 years. Any special interests or talents?" The woman asked, pen poised above her clipboard. Elena hesitated. Beside her, Sophia jumped in. "My grandmother has an amazing singing voice. She never took it professionally, but she's incredible." Elena felt her cheeks warm. "Sophia, please." "That's an exaggeration." The woman looked interested. "Is that so? Well, that's wonderful to know. Enjoy the show, ladies." She moved on to the next row, making notes as she went. "Why did you tell her that?" Elena whispered to her granddaughter. Sophia shrugged. "Because it's true, and you should be proud of it." Before Elena could respond, the lights dimmed. A voice, boomed through the speakers, welcoming everyone to Voices of the Nation. The crowd erupted in applause as the four judges were introduced one by one, culminating with Anthony Rivera. Elena caught her breath as he walked onto the stage. He was taller than she'd imagined, dressed in a stylish suit, his trademark smile flashing as he waved to the audience. For a moment, just a brief moment, their eyes seemed to meet across the distance, and Elena felt a strange connection, not as a fan to a star, but as one singer recognizing another. Then the moment passed and the show began. Little did Elena know that by the end of the day, everything would change. The quiet life she had accepted, the talent she had hidden, all of it was about to be thrust into the spotlight in a way she could never have imagined. The studio lights were brighter than they appeared on television. Elena squinted slightly as another contestant walked onto the stage, a young man with guitar calluses on his fingertips and hope written across his face. This was the fifth performer they'd seen, and the pattern was becoming familiar. Nervous introduction, polite questions from the judges, then the moment of truth as the music began. He looked so young, Elena whispered to Sophia, who was recording snippets on her phone despite the no filming signs posted throughout the venue. "He's 22, Sophia whispered back, having somehow absorbed every contestant's biography from the program. Works at his dad's auto shop but dreams of making music full-time. Elena nodded, finding herself invested in each person's story. She understood what it meant to harbor a dream like that, to feel music pulling at you while life pointed in another direction. The young man began to sing, his voice pleasant but uncertain on the higher notes. Elena could tell he was rushing, slightly nerves getting the better of his timing. She found herself taking deeper breaths as she watched, as if her own steady breathing might somehow help him find his rhythm. Anthony Rivera leaned forward in his judge's chair, his expression thoughtful. Unlike some of the other judges who played up their reactions for the cameras, Anthony seemed genuinely focused on each performance, offering specific technical feedback rather than vague praise or harsh dismissals. When the young man finished, Anthony spoke first. "You've got natural talent," he said, his voice carrying that slight rasp that had become his signature sound. "But you're fighting yourself up there. You need to trust your voice more, especially on the bridge. Try it again. But this time, don't think about us judging you. Just tell the story in the song." The contestant nodded eagerly, visibly relieved at the second chance. His next attempt was noticeably better, more connected to the emotion of the lyrics. Elena found herself smiling at the transformation. This was why she admired Anthony. He could see the potential in people. After the judges voted unanimously to advance the young man to the next round, the host announced a 15-minute break. The audience stirred, stretching legs and checking phones. "I'm going to find the restroom," Sophia said, squeezing past Elena's knees. "Want anything from the concession stand?" "Just water, please," Elena replied, secretly grateful for a moment, alone to absorb the experience. The show was more emotional in person than she'd expected. Each contestant carried such vulnerability onto that stage, offering their dreams up for public judgment. It stirred something in her, a mixture of admiration and old buried wishes. As the break continued, the show's host, a tall woman with a practiced smile, walked through the audience with a microphone, creating casual footage they would use between segments. She stopped a few rows behind Elena, chatting with a family who had driven 6 hours to attend the taping. Elena watched the host work her way through the crowd, asking questions that seemed spontaneous but probably weren't. Still, the woman had a gift for making people comfortable, drawing out interesting comments with genuine seeming interest. "And what about you, ma'am?" The question took Elena by surprise. The host was suddenly standing right beside her seat, microphone extended, camera, operator position just behind. "Me?" Elena asked, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "Yes, I'm talking with audience members during our break. Are you enjoying the show today?" Elena nodded, trying to find her voice. "Very much. The contestants are so talented." "And who are you here with today?" the host prompted, her smile encouraging. "My granddaughter Sophia, she's just stepped out for a moment. These tickets were her birthday gift to me." A birthday gift. How wonderful. May I ask which birthday we're celebrating? 73, Elena said, surprised at how easily she shared this with a stranger, and potentially with television viewers. 73 years young, the host exclaimed. And you're a fan of our show? Yes, I watch every week, especially since Anthony joined as a judge. His music has meant a lot to me over the years. Something in Elena's tone must have caught the host's interest, because instead of moving on to another audience member, she asked, "Are you a music lover yourself?" "I am," Elena said simply. "I've always loved music." "Do you sing or play an instrument?" Before Elena could answer, a voice cut through the conversation, smooth, confident, and carrying just a hint of amusement. Anthony Rivera had apparently left the judges' table during the break and was now standing at the end of Elena's row, microphone in hand. "Let me guess," he said, flashing his famous smile toward the camera. "Church choir?" The audience chuckled, and Elena felt a strange twist in her stomach. Was he making fun of her? "I did sing in church," she acknowledged. "But also, let me stop you there," Anthony said, stepping closer. The cameras followed, and Elena suddenly realized this exchange was likely being recorded for the show. "I've been in this business 30 years now. I can usually tell who's got the gift and who just enjoys singing along to the radio." The audience went quiet, sensing something happening. Elena felt her cheeks grow warm. Anthony continued, his tone light, but with an edge to it. "At your age, I think it's wonderful that you still enjoy music. But there's a difference between appreciating what others can do and having real talent yourself." A murmur ran through the crowd. Was this part of his television persona? The slightly arrogant expert who knew better than everyone else? On screen, it came across as confident expertise, but in person, directed at her, it felt different. "I was actually trained in," Elena began, but Anthony raised his hand, cutting her off again. "The problem with shows like this," he said, addressing the audience more than Elena now, "is that they make everyone think they could be a star if only they had the chance. But real talent is rare. Most people should be content to be in the audience, not on the stage." The host looked uncomfortable, clearly sensing this had gone beyond playful banter. "Well, I think everyone has their own unique gifts," she began. "Sure," Anthony interrupted. "But let's be honest. At a certain point, the time for dreams has passed, hasn't it?" He looked directly at Elena as he said this, his expression almost pitying. "We can't all be performers. Some of us need to be the audience." Silence in the studio was thick. Elena felt as if all the air had been sucked from her lungs. Decades of private passion for music, years of watching this man perform and admiring his artistry, all of it crashed against the casual dismissal in his tone. Just then, Sophia returned, slipping into her seat with a bottle of water. She immediately sensed the tension. "What's going on?" she whispered, looking between her grandmother and the famous singer standing just feet away. Before Elena could answer, the host stepped in, clearly trying to salvage the awkward moment. "We were just chatting with your grandmother about her love of music," she said brightly. "Sophia, right? I understand these tickets were your birthday gift to her?" Sophia nodded, her eyes darting suspiciously between the host and Anthony. "What a thoughtful gift," the host continued. "Does your grandmother share her musical talents with the family?" "All the time," Sophia said firmly. "My grandmother has the most beautiful voice I've ever heard. She used to sing me to sleep with these amazing old songs that would give me goosebumps." Anthony smiled politely, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. "That's lovely. Every grandmother thinks her grandchildren are her biggest fans." He turned toward the camera. "But there's a reason we have auditions for this show. Not everyone with a nice lullaby voice belongs on a professional stage." Elena felt something shift inside her. The hurt of his dismissal was still there, but now another feeling rose alongside it. A slow, burning sense of indignation. Not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been told they were too old, too ordinary, or too anything to pursue what they loved. "You know what? the host said, clearly trying to move things along. Since we're all about discovering talent here, why don't we give Elena a moment to show us what she can do, just for fun? The suggestion hung in the air. Part of Elena wanted to refuse, to sit quietly and wait for this uncomfortable moment to pass. But another part, the part that still remembered Mrs. Bellini's voice saying, "You have a gift," stirred to life. Anthony looked momentarily surprised, then recovered with a small laugh. Sure, why not? Let's give Grandma her moment in the spotlight. The condescension in his tone was unmistakable. Around them, audience members shifted awkwardly, some looking embarrassed on Elena's behalf, others curious to see what would happen. Next, Sophia squeezed her grandmother's hand. "You don't have to do this," she whispered fiercely. "He's being a jerk." But Elena was already rising slowly to her feet. Her heart pounded against her ribs, and her hands trembled slightly. But her eyes were clear and focused. Something long dormant was awakening. "Actually," she said, her voice quiet but steady, "I would be happy to sing something." Anthony's eyebrows lifted in surprise, but he recovered quickly. "Well, this should be interesting," he said, gesturing toward the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Elena to the Voices of the Nation stage." As Elena made her way toward the steps at the side of the stage, she could feel hundreds of eyes on her. The murmur of the crowd seemed distant, as if she were hearing it through water. What was she doing? She hadn't performed in public for years. Certainly. Never on a stage like this, with cameras and lights and a celebrity judge who had already decided she wasn't worth hearing. But with each step, her resolve strengthened. Perhaps it was time to remember who she had been before life's responsibilities had redirected her path. Perhaps it was time to show this man, and herself, what 73 years of loving music really sounded like. The 3 steps leading up to the stage seemed a mile high to Elena. She gripped the handrail, acutely aware of her knees that sometimes troubled her on rainy days. The last thing she needed was to stumble before she even began to sing. Sophia had half risen from her seat, worry etched across her young face, but Elena gave her a small nod. "Stay there. I need to do this alone." Production assistant hurried over, clipping a small microphone to the collar of Elena's purple blouse. "Just speak normally," the young woman whispered, giving Elena an encouraging smile. "And try to forget about the cameras." Easier said than done. Now that Elena stood on the stage, the studio looked different. The audience stretched before her like a sea of curious faces. The bright lights made it hard to make out individual expressions, but she could feel their attention, their anticipation, perhaps their pity. The 3 other judges were watching her with varying degrees of interest. The woman judge leaned forward, her expression kind but skeptical. The 2 men exchanged glances that Elena couldn't quite read. And then there was Anthony, settling back into his chair at the judges' table, an amused smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "So, Elena," the host said, her professional smile firmly in place as she tried to smooth over the awkward situation. "What will you be singing for us today?" Elena hadn't thought that far ahead. She'd been so focused on the decision to stand up that she hadn't considered what song to choose. Her mind raced through possibilities, something simple, something they would expect from a woman her age. No, if she was going to do this, she would really do it. "Con te partirò," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. Time to say goodbye. A ripple of surprise moved through the studio. It was a notoriously difficult piece, made famous by Andrea Bocelli and later covered by countless artists, including Anthony Rivera himself, on his 3rd album. The song required incredible breath control, perfect pitch, and emotional range that challenged even professional singers. Anthony's eyebrows shot up. "That was an ambitious choice," he said, the microphone catching his words clearly. "Perhaps something simpler might be more appropriate? Amazing Grace, maybe? Or You Are My Sunshine?" Several people in the audience laughed, and Elena felt heat rising to her cheeks. He was still mocking her, still assuming she couldn't possibly handle a song of that caliber. "I'd like to sing Conte Partero," she repeated, looking directly at him now. "If that's all right." The woman judge spoke up. "Let her try her choice," she said, giving Anthony a pointed look. "That's what this show is about, isn't it? Giving people a chance." Anthony shrugged, leaning back in his chair. "Of course, by all means." The host gestured to the pianist at the side of the stage. "Do you know the piece?" she asked him. The young man nodded, moving to the grand piano. "What key would you prefer?" he asked Elena. "The original is fine," she said. Another small murmur went through the audience. The original key was challenging even for trained vocalists. The pianist looked uncertain but positioned his hands over the keys. "Ready when you are," he said. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. She thought of Mrs. Bellini, her old vocal teacher, who had shown her how to breathe from her diaphragm, how to support each note properly. "Imagine the sound beginning deep in your body," Mrs. Bellini would say. "Let it rise through you like warm water." The first notes from the piano filled the studio. Elena felt, rather than heard them, vibrations that seemed to connect with something long dormant inside her. She opened her eyes, focused on a spot just above the audience, and began to sing. "Quando sono solo, sogno all'orizzonte." The first phrase emerged clear and steady. Elena could almost feel the surprise in the room. Perhaps they had expected a wavering elderly voice, something sweet but fragile. What came out instead was a sound of surprising power and clarity, the Italian words flowing like water. She didn't look at the judges as she continued into the verse. Instead, she allowed herself to sink into the music, to remember why this particular song had always moved her. It was about partings and meetings, about journeys taken alone and together. It spoke to her own life in ways that felt almost too personal to share. As the verse built toward the chorus, Elena felt her body remembering what to do, how to support, the climbing notes, how to let her voice open fully on the higher passages. 50 years fell away. She was 19 again, standing in Mrs. Bellini's small studio, the old woman nodding with rare approval. "Yes, like that. Now you're singing." Time to say goodbye. The chorus soared through the studio. Elena didn't need to look at the audience to know she had their attention now. She could feel it in the absolute silence between the piano notes, in the held breath of hundreds of people who had expected one thing and were witnessing another. Only then did she allow herself a glance at the judges' table. The woman's mouth was slightly open, her hand frozen in the act of reaching for her water glass. One of the male judges was leaning so far forward he was nearly out of his chair. The other had removed his glasses and was wiping them, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. And Anthony? His expression had transformed entirely. The smug amusement was gone, replaced by something Elena couldn't quite name. Shock, certainly, but something else too. Recognition, perhaps. One musician recognizing another. As the song moved into its second verse, Elena felt a strange liberation. For decades, she had contained this part of herself, letting it out only in private moments. Now it was flowing freely, filling the space, touching strangers who until minutes ago had seen only an old woman, perhaps somebody's kindly grandmother, certainly not an artist in her own right. The second chorus was even stronger than the first. Elena had found her rhythm now, her confidence building with each perfectly executed phrase. The pianist was following her lead, his playing becoming more nuanced as he realized he was accompanying someone who truly understood the music. In the audience, Sophia was crying openly, one hand pressed to her mouth, the other clutching her phone, which she had raised to record the moment despite the venue's rules. Around her, other audience members had taken out their phones too, capturing what they somehow knew was an extraordinary moment. As the bridge approached, the most challenging part of the song, Elena took a slightly deeper breath. This was where many singers faltered, where the demanding vocal line required perfect control and emotional conviction simultaneously. Mrs. Bellini's words echoed in her mind. The technique serves the emotion, never the other way around. The notes rose higher, and Elena's voice rose with them, unwavering. She wasn't just showing off her technical skill now. She was telling her story. The story of dreams deferred but not forgotten, of talents hidden but not lost, of a life lived in one direction while another path remained untaken. When she reached the final chorus, something shifted in the room. It wasn't just that the audience was captivated, though they were utterly silent except for a few audible gasps at particularly beautiful moments. It was that something invisible had connected them all, the shared recognition of genuine artistry, the rare moment when technique and emotion fuse into something transcendent. The final notes hung in the air like crystals catching light. Elena held the last phrase perfectly, letting it diminish slowly, naturally, the way Mrs. Bellini had taught her all those years ago. Never cut off abruptly, she would say. Let the listener feel that the music continues, even in silence. Then, it was over. For a heartbeat, the studio remained completely still, suspended in the moment that had just passed. Elena stood on the stage, suddenly aware again of her 73-year-old body, of the bright lights, of the hundreds of eyes fixed upon her. Then the applause began. It started somewhere in the back of the audience and rushed forward like a wave, building until it filled the entire space. People were standing, calling out, some wiping tears from their cheeks. Sophia was on her feet, jumping up and down like she had when she was a little girl, her face radiant with pride. The judges stood too, all except Anthony, who remained seated, his expression unreadable. The host was trying to speak into her microphone, but her words were lost in the continuing applause. Elena felt oddly calm amid the storm of reaction. Something had shifted inside her, some long-held tension finally released. It didn't matter what Anthony or anyone else thought now. She had remembered who she was, had given voice to the part of herself that had waited patiently through decades of ordinary life. The host finally managed to make herself heard over the gradually subsiding applause. "Elena," she said, her professional composure cracking slightly to reveal genuine emotion. "That was... I don't even have words." The woman judge spoke next, still standing. "Where did you learn to sing like that?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. "I had a wonderful teacher when I was young," Elena replied, surprised at how steady her voice remained. "Before life took me in another direction." The host turned to Anthony, who still hadn't spoken. "Anthony, your thoughts?" The studio went quiet again. Everyone waited for the famous singer's verdict, for the expert assessment that could either validate or diminish what they had just witnessed. Anthony looked up at Elena, meeting her eyes directly for the first time. The mocking smile was gone completely. In its place was something much more complex, humility perhaps mixed with professional respect. "I was wrong," he said simply, his voice barely above a whisper. The microphone caught it anyway, carried it through the silent studio. "I was completely wrong." The studio buzzed with electricity after Elena's performance. Even the camera operators and production assistants, who had seen countless auditions over the years, stood transfixed at the edges of the room. The host seemed momentarily at a loss for words, a rare occurrence for a woman paid to keep conversations flowing smoothly. "I was completely wrong," Anthony repeated, standing up now. "I owe you an apology, Elena." Elena felt strangely light, as if she might float away if not for the solid stage beneath her feet. The rush of performing, the focused energy, the connection with the music, the release of something long contained, left her both exhausted and exhilarated. "It's all right," she said, meaning it. The hurt of his earlier dismissal had been washed away by the act of singing itself. "No, it's not all right," Anthony insisted, stepping out from behind the judges' table and approaching the stage. "I made assumptions based on your age. I was arrogant and disrespectful." The studio audience had settled back into their seats, but the energy remained heightened. Everyone sensed they were witnessing something unprecedented in the show's history. "Where did you train?" Anthony asked, genuine curiosity replacing his earlier condescension. "Your technique is It's classical, but there's something else there too. I studied with Mrs. Bellini for 3 years when I was a teenager, Elena explained. She was an opera singer from Italy who had retired to our town. After that, life happened. Family responsibilities, work. You never pursued it professionally? Elena shook her head. It wasn't really an option for me. Not then. The woman judge leaned forward. Well, it should have been. That was world-class singing, Elena. The audience applauded again, and Elena felt her cheeks warm. She glanced toward Sophia, who was beaming with pride, still clutching her phone. Several audience members around her were showing each other their own recordings of the performance. One of the male judges spoke up. I don't think we've ever had someone your age perform on this show, he said. But after hearing you, I'm wondering why not. Maybe we've been missing out on a whole category of talent. The host, having recovered her professional composure, stepped forward. I think we might need to rethink some things, she agreed. Then turned to Elena. Would you be willing to stay for a little while after the show? I know our producers will want to speak with you. Before Elena could answer, Anthony cut in. Before that, he said, I'd like to ask Elena something. He looked directly at her, a new respect evident in his gaze. Would you sing with me? A collective gasp went through the studio. Anthony Rivera, with 15 platinum albums and 6 Grammy Awards, wanted to sing with the grandmother he had mocked just minutes earlier. Even the other judges looked shocked. Right now? Elena asked, her heart suddenly racing again. Anthony nodded. That song you chose? I recorded it 10 years ago, but I've never performed it as a duet. He turned to the pianist. Could you play it again? From the top? The young man nodded eagerly, clearly thrilled to be part of whatever was happening. The audience stirred with anticipation as Anthony stepped onto the stage beside Elena. Are you sure? Elena whispered, suddenly aware of how strange this situation was. An hour ago, she had been just another face in the audience. Now she stood beside one of the most famous singers in the country. More sure than I've been about anything in a long time, Anthony replied quietly. Music recognizes music, Elena. I should have heard it in your voice even before you sang. The pianist began the introduction again, the familiar notes filling the studio. Anthony nodded to Elena, signaling for her to take the first verse as she had before. She began to sing, her voice perhaps a touch less steady than earlier, not from lack of skill but from the sheer surrealism of the moment. When Anthony joined in for the chorus, the effect was stunning. Their voices, one seasoned by decades of professional training and performance, the other nurtured in private moments stolen from a busy life, blended with an almost eerie perfection. His slightly darker tone complemented her clearer soprano, creating harmonies that made the already emotional song even more powerful. The audience sat completely still, witnessing something they somehow understood was rare and precious. The other judges watched with expressions ranging from amazement to something like reverence. Even the cameramen seemed spellbound, their equipment momentarily forgotten. As the song built toward its climax, Elena felt a strange sense of completion. This moment, singing alongside someone whose music had carried her through difficult times, being truly seen and heard after decades of quiet anonymity, seemed to bridge the gap between the life she had lived and the one she had once imagined for herself. When the final notes faded, the silence was profound. Then the studio erupted in what could only be described as a roar. People were on their feet, some crying openly, others calling out words of praise that blended into an indistinguishable wave of sound. Anthony turned to Elena, his own eyes suspiciously bright. Thank you, he said simply, the words almost lost in the continuing applause. For what? She asked. For reminding me why I do this. Not for the fame or the sales, but for moments like this. Real music. The next hour passed in a blur. The show's producers huddled in corners, speaking urgently into headsets. The remaining contestants were quickly rescheduled for the next day's taping. Camera operators repositioned equipment to capture impromptu interviews with Elena and Anthony. Sophia was finally allowed to join her grandmother backstage, throwing her arms around Elena with a squeal of delight. "Nana, you broke the internet!" "I what?" Elena asked, still trying to absorb everything that had happened. Everyone was filming, even though they weren't supposed to, Sophia explained breathlessly, showing Elena her phone. "They're all posting the videos online. You're trending on 3 different platforms already." Elena looked at the small screen in bewilderment. There she was, standing on the stage, her silver hair catching the studio lights, her mouth open in song. The video was shaky, clearly shot by an audience member trying to be discreet. But the sound was surprisingly clear. She could hear her own voice filling the studio, followed by the wave of astonished applause. "This is very strange," Elena murmured, handing the phone back to Sophia. "Strange good or strange bad?" Sophia asked, studying her grandmother's face. Elena considered the question. "Both, I think, but mostly good." A production assistant approached them, clipboard in hand. "Ms. Vasquez, the producers would like to speak with you now if you're ready." Elena nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of her age again. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her tired but oddly peaceful. "Will this take long?" she asked. "I'm not as young as I was an hour ago." The young woman smiled. "They just want to discuss some opportunities that might interest you. Your granddaughter is welcome to join us." In a small conference room off the main studio, 3 people in business attire waited. They introduced themselves as executive producers of the show, though Elena immediately forgot their names in the confusion of the moment. "Ms. Vasquez," the woman began, "what happened today was unprecedented in our 12 seasons on air." "I'm sorry if I disrupted your schedule," Elena said, ever polite. The woman laughed. "Please don't apologize. What you gave us was television gold. Which brings us to why we wanted to speak with you." Over the next 20 minutes, they outlined a proposal that left both Elena and Sophia speechless. They wanted to feature Elena's story in a special episode, her early training, the path not taken, and her surprise performance that had humbled one of music's biggest stars. Beyond that, they were offering her a guest appearance on the season finale, performing alongside the finalists. "This is all very flattering," Elena said when they finished. "But I'm not sure I'm looking for this kind of attention at my age." The male producer leaned forward. "Ms. Vasquez, what you did today wasn't just impressive because of your age. It was impressive, period. Your performance would have been remarkable coming from a trained vocalist half your age." "He's right, Nana," Sophia added, squeezing her grandmother's hand. "This isn't about your age. It's about your gift." Elena felt tears threatening. All those years of singing quietly at home, of wondering what might have been, and now this sudden recognition. It was overwhelming. "Could I have some time to think about it?" she asked. "Of course," the woman said. "But I should mention that the videos from today are already gaining traction online. People are asking who you are, sharing your performance. This may be happening whether you officially participate or not." As if on cue, there was a knock at the conference room door. Anthony entered, looking slightly abashed at interrupting. "Sorry," he said, "but I wanted to catch Elena before she left." He crossed to where she sat and handed her a business card. "This is my personal number. I meant what I said out there. I'd like to work with you, if you're interested." Elena took the card, too stunned to speak. "No pressure," Anthony added quickly. "But when you find a voice like yours, at any age, you don't just walk away from it, at least you shouldn't." Something in his tone suggested he was thinking of her path not taken, the career that might have been. As they left the studio an hour later, Elena felt as if she were moving through a dream. The afternoon sun seemed brighter somehow, the world slightly altered. Sophia chatted excitedly beside her, already making plans for interviews and performances that might never happen. "Slow down," Elena laughed, linking her arm through her granddaughter's. "I haven't agreed to anything yet." "But you will, right?" Sophia asked, her young face earnest. "Nana, this is like a second chance. How many people get those?" Elena looked up at the clear blue sky, considering the question. Second chances. New beginnings at 73. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. I don't know what I'm going to do, she admitted. But for the first time in a very long time, I feel like anything might be possible. As they reached the car, Elena's phone, an old model she kept mainly for emergencies, began to ring. It was her daughter Lisa, Sophia's mother. Mom? Lisa's voice was breathless. Are you okay? My friend just called and said she saw a video of you singing on some talent show. She said it's all over the internet. Elena met Sophia's eyes over the top of the phone, and they both burst into laughter. The kind of deep, joyful laughter that comes when life takes a turn so unexpected that there's nothing to do but surrender to the wonder of it all. Elena's garden had always been her sanctuary, the place where she felt most herself. 6 weeks after her unexpected moment on national television, she sat on her weathered wooden bench, watching bees drift lazily between her flowering plants. The morning sunlight filtered through the leaves of her old maple tree, creating patterns on the ground that shifted with each gentle breeze. So much had changed, and yet this, the quiet beauty of her little patch of earth, remained constant. It anchored her as the world around her spun in directions she never could have imagined. Her phone chimed from her pocket. That was new too. Her old flip phone had been replaced with a smartphone after Sophia insisted she needed something that could handle emails, social media notifications, and video calls. Elena still wasn't entirely comfortable with it, but she had to admit it made staying connected easier, especially now. The message was from Anthony. Just checking in. How are you feeling about tomorrow? Tomorrow. The word sent a flutter of nervous excitement through her chest. Tomorrow was the live season finale of Voices of the Nation, where she would perform as a special guest. Not as an insulted audience member who surprised everyone, but as an invited artist in her own right. Nervous but ready, she typed back slowly, still getting used to the touch screen. Just enjoying some quiet time in my garden first. His response came quickly. Perfect preparation. Center yourself before the storm. Call if you need anything. Elena smiled, setting the phone aside. Their friendship had developed naturally over the past weeks, unexpected but genuine. He had called 3 days after the show, just to check in. That first conversation had been slightly awkward, both of them finding their way past the unusual circumstances of their meeting. But the second call had been easier, and by the third they were talking like old friends who happened to share a passion for music. It was Anthony who had helped her navigate the sudden attention, the interview, requests, the contract offers from the show's producers. Don't sign anything without having your own lawyer look at it, he had advised. And remember, you get to choose how much of this you want. There's no rule that says you have to say yes to everything. That guidance had been invaluable as Elena figured out her own boundaries. Yes to the guest appearance on the finale. No to the immediate record deal one company had rushed to offer. Yes to a few select interviews with journalists who seemed interested in the deeper aspects of her story. No to reality. TV producers who wanted to film her journey as she discovered fame in her golden years. Mom, are you out here? Elena looked up to see her daughter Lisa coming through the garden gate, carrying what looked like a garment bag. Just getting some fresh air, Elena replied. Is that the dress? Lisa nodded, a mix of pride and something like bewilderment crossing her face. Still can't believe my mother needs a stylist-approved outfit for national television. They went inside, where Lisa carefully laid the garment bag across Elena's bed and unzipped it. Inside was a floor-length gown in deep blue with subtle silver, threading that caught the light as the fabric moved. It was elegant without being flashy, age-appropriate without being matronly, exactly what Elena had hoped for. It's beautiful, she said, running her fingers over the material. The show's wardrobe department sent 3 options, but the stylist said this one would complement your coloring best and look gorgeous under the stage lights. Lisa shook her head slightly. Phrases I never thought I'd say about my mother's TV appearance. Elena laughed. Life is full of surprises. They spent the afternoon going through the details for the next day. The car that would pick Elena up, the schedule at the studio, the rehearsal plan. Lisa had become something of a manager for her mother, helping filter requests and organize the suddenly complicated logistics of Elena's life. "Oh, I almost forgot," Lisa said, pulling an envelope from her purse. "This came for you," forwarded through the TV station. Elena opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter on pale blue stationery. "Dear Ms. Vasquez," it began. "You don't know me, but I wanted to thank you. I'm 68 years old, and for the past 20 years I've told myself it was too late to pursue my dream of writing. After seeing you sing on that stage, I pulled out the novel I started a decade ago and have written every day since. Your courage reminded me that it's never too late to be who you might have been. With gratitude, Rose." Elena felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. This wasn't the first such letter she'd received. There had been dozens, each sharing how her moment of courage had sparked something in the writer's life. A long-abandoned hobby revisited, a class finally taken, a talent shared after years of hiding. "Another fan?" Lisa asked. "Something better," Elena replied, carefully folding the letter. "Someone who found their own courage." That evening, Elena practiced her songs one last time, her voice filling the small living room where she had sung lullabies to her children and later to her grandchildren. Tomorrow she would sing for millions, but tonight she sang for herself, reconnecting with the pure joy that had first drawn her to music all those years ago. Her phone rang just as she finished. It was Mrs. Bellini's granddaughter calling as promised with news. "I found it," the woman said excitedly. "The recording my grandmother made of your final recital at her studio. It was in a box of old reel-to-reel tapes in her attic. I had it digitized." Elena's heart leaped. "You're kidding, that was more than 50 years ago." 54 to be exact. "You were 19. I'm emailing you the file now." After they hung up, Elena sat at her computer, another new addition to her life, and clicked on the file that appeared in her inbox. The quality was poor, full of the pops and hisses of old tape, but through the noise came a clear young voice, her voice, singing an aria from La Bohème. She closed her eyes, transported, back to that small studio with its upright piano and faded curtains. She could almost smell Mrs. Bellini's perfume, could almost feel the nervous excitement of performing for her demanding teacher. The girl on the recording had no idea what lay ahead, the choices she would make, the paths she would take and not take the long detour that would eventually lead back to music in the most unexpected way. When the recording ended, Elena sat quietly for a moment, honoring the connection between that hopeful young woman and the person she had become. There was no use wondering what if. Life had taken the turns it took, but there was something powerful in reclaiming this part of herself, in allowing her talent to be recognized at last. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Elena woke early, a lifetime habit she had never broken. She went through her usual routine, making tea, reading a bit, watering her indoor plants, before beginning to prepare for the day ahead. By the time the car arrived to take her to the studio, she felt calm, centered in a way she hadn't expected. Sophia was already waiting at the curb, having insisted on accompanying her grandmother for moral support. "Ready for your big comeback?" she asked, as Elena settled into the car beside her. "Can you call it a comeback if I never really came in the first place?" Elena asked with a smile. "Fine. Ready for your debut then?" "As ready as I'll ever be at 73. The studio was a hive of activity when they arrived. Production assistants rushed in every direction. Camera operators adjusted equipment, and contestants from the season huddled in small, nervous groups. Several recognized Elena as she walked in, approaching her with warm greetings and admiration. "Here you are. Performance changed the whole season," one young man told her, his eyes earnest. "After you sang, all of us stepped up our game. We realized what was really possible if you put your whole heart into it." In the green room, Elena found a small vase of yellow roses waiting for her with a card from Anthony. "From one singer to another," it read. "Shine tonight. The world is ready to hear you." The rehearsal went smoothly. Elena ran through her solo piece and then the duet she would perform with Anthony for the finale. The stage manager praised her professionalism, seeming surprised that someone new to television could hit her mark so consistently and respond so quickly to technical directions. "I was a school teacher for 30 years, Elena explained with a laugh. "I know how to follow a lesson plan." As the time for the live broadcast approached, the energy in the building intensified. Hair and makeup artists fussed over Elena. The wardrobe team made last-minute adjustments to her gown and sound. Technicians checked her microphone repeatedly. In the midst of this controlled chaos, Anthony appeared at her side. "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly. "Surprisingly well," Elena replied, "though I keep wondering if I'm going to wake up and find this was all some elaborate dream." He laughed. "I felt that way for about the first 5 years of my career. Sometimes I still do." He paused, studying her face. "You know, whatever happens next, whether this is the beginning of something new for you or just a wonderful moment to remember, what you did matters. Not just the singing, though that was extraordinary, but the courage to stand up when you were dismissed, to show the world who you really are." Before Elena could respond, a production assistant appeared. "5 minutes, Ms. Vasquez. You'll be introduced right after the commercial break." Anthony squeezed her hand. "See you out there, partner." As Elena took her position backstage, she could hear the host warming up the audience, could feel the vibration of applause through the floor. The monitor nearby showed the studio from the camera's perspective, the bright lights, the eager audience, the elaborate stage where she would soon stand. She thought of her garden at home, of the letters from people she had inspired, of the young woman on that crackling old recording. She thought of all the quiet years when music had been her private joy, and the surprising turn that had brought her to this moment of public recognition. The stage manager signaled 1 minute remaining. Elena took a deep breath, feeling the familiar, gathering of energy that came before singing. In a strange way, this enormous stage with its millions of viewers felt no different from her small garden where she had sung for decades, just for the joy of it. The audience might be larger, the stakes higher, but the essential truth remained the same. When she sang, she was fully herself. And now, the host's voice rang out. The moment many of you have been waiting for. The woman whose extraordinary voice and courage captured hearts across the nation. Please welcome to our stage, Elena Vasquez. The applause swelled as Elena stepped into the light, not as an insulted old woman with something to prove, but as an artist embracing her gift, at last, proving that talent knows no age and that it's never too late to be recognized for who you truly are.